Superman, House of Brainiac Special Issue 1. Various creators, because it's split into a few stories
Yep.
with different teams. It's kind of bookended by Brainiac stuff itself. The middle story, which is actually, I'd say, most of the page count, is actually a Mark Russell story about Perry White running for mayor from the perspective of Bibbo. So we'll get to that. I will say it wasn't the first thing I read. It was the second, but I will say my mood when I started reading this first story, and it was just like, oh, we're doing like the history of the Zarnians and like how they encountered Brainiac before, and we're explaining the hierarchy and this doctor lady who contacted Brainiac. I have to admit, this did not put me in a good mood. I was miserable reading this. I'm like, I do not give a shit about Lobo's planet. I never have. So I am not like, and this is not me saying that Williamson's hit that point where he's ruined the story. I don't think he has. I don't think I count this as a main chapter of the story. This feels like side content to me.
They even call it 2.5.
Yes.
Right. So they're calling it a 0.5 issue. Like So I'll take the opposite end of that, and like, I'm not saying that I loved it, but the way that Williamson compares, Krypton versus Zarnia, and how Brainiac went through Krypton and collected Kandor versus the city that he collected there, and what he had learned from both. I did like that, because at the same time that he's telling the story, you get these little bits of Superman and Lobo fighting that Zarnian army. From the last time we left them in, what was it, Action? Or Superman? I can't remember which came first.
It does not matter, whatever issue it was.
But whatever issue it was. So I do like that, because, these are the two last sons of these cultures, and how different they are, yet they're allied because of one thing, and that's me. And it definitely it leans into the Brainiac being this, thinking that it has everything figured out. And on top of that, I'm not a Star Trek watcher, so correct me if I'm wrong here. I feel like Williamson's giving Brainiac much more of a Borg vibe through this, I guess, event. And I do like that, because I don't think I've seen that version of Brainiac.
I don't know if I'd agree with that comparison, but I realize you're making that comparison without having seen.
Yes.
Like
Borg
so
when I think of the Borg, I think that they're these things that assimilate, right? And they take over, and you join the hive mind, right? Is that
that part's correct? Yeah.
Okay. So I feel like what Brainiac's doing that is in the pursuit of knowledge. So I don't know what the Borg's whole thing is. I don't know if it's just conquest, but I feel like Brainiac trying to envelop all the knowledge in the multiverse, right? And this is his way of going about it. The way that Williamson's characterized that, through the use of like we, and this is what I did at that time, it makes Brainiac feel like this age old thing, almost like a society that's been given its own personality. Like, I don't feel like this is just a character. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, the thing with the Borg that I really like about them, and they kind of ruined this later on by giving them a queen and stuff, which kind of ruins it. But the thing with the Borg is that they have no personality. That's what's so like kind of creepy about them, is that they just do not care. Like, even if you're technically an enemy of the Borg, if you don't pose a threat to them in the moment, if they don't think you're a threat, they'll just ignore you and walk past you. They don't care. There's not a hint. Whereas Brainiac, I would still say, like, he still feels like Brainiac. He still has like a personality. He still feels like him, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean by like a society given like characterization. Like, I feel like it's not just this, Brainiac the Collector. It's like Brainiac the Collective now, and I like that. I've never seen that before. Just the different versions. So like when we see the version that went to Zarnia versus the version that went to Krypton, right? Technically they're the same, but they feel different. But everything they do is for one cause, So it feels like a hive in that way. So, and I thought the way that he talks about Zarnia here, like, reinforced that.
Yeah, the whole thing here really is that basically this lady reached out to Brainiac because Zarnians at this point had, through science, had made themselves all immortal. And we had this sort of like rebel Zarnian causing trouble, and it was like, well, how do we deal with them? Because we can't kill them. So what do we possibly do? And she basically finds Brainiac and reaches out to him, and then is like surprised that Brainiac says that he's going to kill the rest of the planet when he takes a city. And even though he agrees he won't, he does it anyway. And she's like, "You betrayed us." And I'm like, well, I mean, why wouldn't he? What reason does he have? Like, he still gets what you offered him, even if he kills everyone else.
Right. And he's very like methodical in explaining this in his narration. And I thought that was kind of funny too. That gave me a little chuckle. I was like, yeah, no, I take what I want and then I leave. I don't care about deals. You know, it's very cold logic.
Yeah. And the only sort of interesting thing is that he doesn't quite finish killing them because he's taken aback that this father is like trying to save his children, even though they're definitely going to die. And that makes him sort of stop and, you know, question it. And it makes him leave, but he comes back later because he thinks it was a moment of weakness, only to find that other stuff's happened by that point. But it just kind of ends in this note where he's watching Earth right now and seeing how different people are reacting to the fact that Superman's not there. And that's the end of this first story. There's not much more to it than that. That's where it ends on. And then it's the Bibble story. I'd say it's more a Perry White story. Just Bibble happens to be the
narration.
Yeah, he's the one who's given this perspective, but it's really Perry's story about him running for mayor and how he's not really equipped to be a politician. And it's sort of time and time again, the campaign manager telling him to do stuff, and he's struggling. You know, is the Daily Planet giving him preferential treatment? And then Lois slaps down the paper that says "political amateur joins race."
Yep.
And it just, you know, it's this is the best part of the issue. Don't get me wrong, is this Perry story?
Yeah. So it's a typical Mark Russell story that's kind of taking contemporary themes, stuff that's going on in the real world, and then throwing superheroes into it and almost making it like a morality play. And you know, his Flintstones did this. His Wonder Twins did this. So it's very much on brand. So when I saw it was Mark Russell and Steve Pugh, I knew kind of what I was in for. I didn't realize having Bibbo be the narrator is like the perfect thing, where he's almost the perfect vessel for Mark Russell to write one of these type of stories, right? Because Bibbo's the type of character that he idolizes Superman for what Superman stands for. It's not like because Superman's this big, strong guy, right? It's that Superman cares about Metropolis as much as Bibbo does, even though he's not from there. And through that frame is we get the story of Perry White running against this other guy, what's his name? Garen Blake, and about how Garen Blake has come out against the A-Town part of Metropolis, and basically he's villainizing these alien people as invaders.
Yeah, for those who aren't remembering this, A-Town is like the district where the aliens are living in Metropolis.
Yeah. And so, you know, he's using that as, you know, this, you know, point to get people to vote for him and not for Perry, whereas Perry's actually trying to go about it in the way of like, hey, I'm going to try to make Metropolis better. And
Perry's promising actual improvements in some ways, whereas this opposition is just trying to rile up hatred for something.
Yep.
And it's something that, you know, Perry gets frustrated with when he's in the bar at one point with Bibble, and this guy comes in yelling at him, and he says, hey, if you vote him in and he's then mayor, and even after that all the aliens are gone and you're still frustrated, you're still underpaid, you're still struggling as a parent, and you still have all the same life frustrations, like, who are you going to blame for everything then? And the guy just kind of ignores him. But it's kind of getting to this idea that this rival is just feeling hatred, and the idea that everyone will vote for him, not because he's actually promising anything. Like, he doesn't have to actually do anything once he wins based on these things. He's just got everyone riled up to agree with him, and they'll go, oh yeah, we'll vote for him because he agrees with us. But that's it. It's all based in fear and hatred. It's, you know, kind of get into like that typical modern political landscape.
Yeah. And, you know, and the part that really got me, though, is when Bibbo's talking about the reason that they serve milk in the bar is because the Ace of Clubs was a place that were in Suicide Slum that welcomed everybody, even kids, right? It was like this place away from the chaos. And, you know, he ordered the milk when he was a kid. So now he keeps that. And then in his story, there's this family that comes in with their newly christened baby. And, you know, Bibbo makes up a bottle of milk for the baby. And it's just been this, you know, long established thing there, even when Superman comes in, right? And it's just this tie of what, you know, what makes Bibbo care about Metropolis as much. And it's the people, right? It's the people that live there, and that he doesn't like that there's this amount of people that live in Metropolis that are feeling this way, that's giving Blake, you know, not an edge exactly, but, you know, he could win. He could beat Perry, and that's bothering Bibbo because, you know, Bibbo wants to be like Superman and believe in what's better.
Yeah, and there's an incident when they have this debate where a young alien girl is basically ganged up on by a bunch of the angry voters, and she runs and scared, and Bibbo has to fight a couple of them off, and this girl runs away crying. And the sort of send off to the story is that this young guy comes into the bar, and Bibbo like says in the narration, "Oh, I recognize this guy. He was there at the rally. He was there, you know, shouting bad things. He was one of the you know, the wrong'uns, if you will." And the guy sits down and basically says, like, I'm not so sure I've changed my mind about everything I thought before, but I have at least decided something that I don't want to be. And Bibbo kind of says, well, that's a start. This idea that clearly scaring this young girl, running off, fearing for her life, has been a bit of a shock to the system, where he kind of realizes the sort of things that he was helping support.
Right. There's actual consequences to the stuff that he's spewing, right? Because to this guy, it was just this nameless, faceless thing. But, you know, he saw the consequences of his actions, and it made him reevaluate. And says, that's the start.
And Bibbo kind of like bookends the story with his narration here, because he talks about how these little things that would come in, he called them miracles. And the idea here at the end is that this guy coming in and having this kind of change of heart is kind of like, you know, oh, it's proof that miracles still walk into this bar. Stuff still comes in and changes. And, like, you know, just when he's ready to sort of, like, you know, maybe lose a bit of hope or get a bit more cynical, something will come in that will sort of, like, remind them, oh, no, things can be good, people can change, whatever it may be. So, it's just a solid story.
It's really nice. I like when Mark Russell does this kind of stuff, right? Because he has a certain type of story that he's very good at telling, and it's this one.
Here's the thing, though. I'm going to make a bit of a more objective critique here, not about the story itself. This has
the placement.
This has nothing to do with House of Brainiac, and it's like more than half the book.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's my one thing. I would have read this just as like a special, like a Superman, you know, Perry White Bibbo special or whatever. So maybe they didn't have a place for it, because they try to kind of tie it in, because they say that there's no heroes, there's no, you know, supes.
They mention family. Yeah. They mention that the supers are gone, and that's like basically the politicians saying, hey, look, we don't want them back. But that's basically the only tie-in to House of Brainiac.
And that's an easy tweak to make, because there's no change in the art or anything. But so I wonder if they just had this for something, and they threw it in here to pad the page numbers. But again, I'm not mad that it's there, you know, because I really enjoyed the story.
It just kind of gets me back to, like, if you just called this an annual, I don't know if they've already had an annual this year, maybe that's why they couldn't, but if they just called this an annual and you had all the, you know, like, oh, there's a couple of tie-ins to House of Brainiac, but there's also other stories, it would have just felt fine. But the fact that this is called House of Brainiac Special, and then half or more of it feels like it has nothing to do with House of Brainiac, feels a bit weird, but... Hey, it is what it is. I will say I did like the art as well. I think there's a couple of pages when Perry's talking to Lois, and they do like sort of like just the line work on both of them, and like one's just blue on white background, and then the next one's just red on white background. I thought that was really pretty. You know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I agree. I like the way that Pugh draws Bibbo, because he looks like this big scary guy, you know, but then he draws him smiling, and all that scariness is gone. It was kind of similar to how he drew Fred Flintstone as well. So it's kind of the perfect artist for this Bibbo and Perry story, because Perry's the same kind of guy, right? He's not like blue collar like Bibbo, but Perry can be this big kind of scary looking guy that actually has a heart of gold. So kind of perfect art for that.
Yeah. I mean, Bibbo kind of is Fred Flintstone-esque in his size and sort of look, so I suppose that's fair. Which is not to insult, but I mean, I think that's partly why Bibbo's a good vantage point for this story, is because he's good. He's a good person, but he's not like some genius. He's kind of like he's the common man, but he's a really good-hearted common man, and that's why he's like, oh, I'm never going to understand all the like the cutthroat logistics of politics, and he doesn't. He admits that multiple times as he's narrating things. But it's the idea that he has this. And I think that's why it ties in nicely with that guy at the end who just says, "I at least know what I don't want to be now." And Bibbles, at least on some level, can kind of like understand and respect that. So it's a solid story that has nothing to do with the crossover that's currently happening.
I expected this to end with the Blake character having a speech and then the Brainiac stuff happening, right? Like. That's kind of where I expected it to go. And going, see, look, this is what I've been talking about.
Yeah, I agree. I expected it to come in at some point, like, one way or another, like it would tie in more as it went on, and it never quite did. And then the last part of the book is called Signal. It's Joshua Williamson again writing with Fico Ozio on the art. I will say I actually quite liked the art in this. It had a very kind of sort of shady 90s look to it, lots of dark shadows. Lots of sort of moody expressions. I mean, I will say everyone looks a bit bulkier than they normally do, but I actually think Brainiac looks quite good, a little bit bulky. He's got that strong jawline. I don't know.
Gives him like he has a sense of mass to him. He's not just like a cybernetic being, Yeah.
I mean, I get why sometimes they draw him sleek because, he's a computer. He doesn't have to, it's the T-1000 effect, right? But at the same time, though, it works for Arnold to be the Terminator because, well, why wouldn't he be like chiseled perfection? If he makes his own body, or if he can alter his own body, then why wouldn't he just be like, I don't know. It works anyway. It looks good. So the big thing here is that Waller goes to talk to the Council of Light again, which I'm glad there was a little box here reminding us when this popped up, because I literally was like, when did this happen? I remember this coming up, but when? It was the end of Dark Crisis. They do tell us in the book, but so she's like, hey, I need to know who you are if you're going to be helping me, yada yada, and she's like, come on, get out with it. And sure enough, it's probably the most lackluster possible reveal, I think.
Yeah, it went over like a fart in church for me.
I'm like, it felt like so the reveal here is the Council of Light are just a bunch of Brainiacs, and all I could feel was like, this book's already had lots of Brainiac in it. There was nothing exciting about seeing more Brainiacs.
I was hoping like, are these going to be the Lords of Order? Because they talk about we plucked you from Earth 3, and I was like, oh, she renamed everything. It's the Hall of Order, not the Hall of Justice. And I'm like, okay, this would make sense. And then I was like, oh, it's just Brainiac? Oh, it's a Council of Brainiac. Okay. And then I just kind of shrugged. So, I don't know.
I feel like if we didn't know the House of Brainiac was coming and this was the tease for it, like this was like, so there was no mention of Brainiac for whatever book we were in, and then at the end, Amanda Waller said, hey, who are you? And then it was Brainiac, and they said, oh, and we've got this big thing planned. That would be fine because it'd be like setting you up, but we're already in the middle of House of Brainiac, so having like this reveal just kind of felt like a bit of a thud.
But why? And also, I'm just trying to think, why would Brainiac feel the need to disguise himself? You think that he would just tell Waller, this is what you're doing for me. I got you off of Earth 3. And here's the technology you need. But when the time comes, I'm taking the supers off of your hands. Like, I don't know. It's weird that he felt the need to disguise himself.
Well, I mean, one justification is actually kind of comes up in the sense where Waller, like, they bring up the fact that back in, what was it? No Justice, it was called, that early Rebirth crossover. Waller, like, basically had a hand in killing whatever Brainiac was there at the time.
Version.
And they bring that up, so maybe the idea is that if they just showed that they were Brainiac, then she would, because this is the thing, as soon as they revealed that they're Brainiacs, she's like, oh, screw this, I'm not working with you, and like, you'll regret this, Waller, right? That's so going into absolute power, like, Amanda Waller's severing ties with Brainiac here. So we'll see where that goes. I mean, we see that Brainiac's building his like Queen
Brainiac Queen.
yeah, whatever this is at the end.
Right.
So, I mean, I like this part more than the Zarnian story, just purely because it felt like it was at least teasing where we're going next. But you know, I do think it's weird that this House of Brainiac special, the best part of it is the part that has almost nothing to do with House of Brainiac, and then the other parts are just kind of. But I'm still looking forward to the next regular issue because I don't think that this has ruined anything. Yeah. It just feels like filler material because they wanted to do a special for the 5th week. That's it. It doesn't feel like, oh hey, this is the 7th part of the story that we can slot in here. It just feels like, oh, can you squeeze out some extra fluff that we can put out and charge, $6 for?
Yeah, because if this was the tease that kicked off House of Brainiac, I think that would have been okay, right? Or it came out the same week as. No. But now we've had two parts of the stories.
Yeah, it's weird. Admittedly, it'd be weird given what was already in the Free Comic Book Day, but if this last part was the 12 issues in the Free Comic Book Day teaser, it would have been fine.
Yeah.
For what it was. But instead, it's the last part of this weird special, and we're already in the middle of the event, so it just, I don't know, it all feels a bit odd.
Yeah.
Yeah, so... Yeah, weird.
So we're going to rate this as a whole, or how are we doing this?
Yeah, we'll rate it as a whole. I think that's the fair way of doing it. I don't... It's a very weird special. I certainly can't recommend it, really, in the sense that... It's certainly not as part of House of Brainiac. If you really want to read the Russell story, then by all means, go for it.
That was going to be my thing, even when we started talking about it, is this is worth it just for that Mark Russell story. So, the price of it, and how much was this book? For $6 for that Mark Russell story, that's about a fair price, I would say. Or just wait and catch it on a sale or something. You want it in the shop.
I mean, honestly, get DC Infinite and read it in a few months.
Yeah, or that one too.
That's probably the best recommendation.
Don't be a Luddite like me and do that.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
So there you go. All right. What are you rating it?
All right. So I want to give a lot of weight to the Mark Russell and Steve Pugh story. So I'll give this a 6.5.
Yeah, I will go 6 out of 10, and that is largely for the Russell story. That's dragging it up. I think if it wasn't for that and it was just the other two things, I'd be giving it like a 4. So yeah. So sometimes you get some interesting gems in a week 5, and sometimes you get a bunch of filler. And I guess this was a bit of both in a sense because of the Russell story, but oh well.